Good afternoon. My name is Lucy Sandell, and I work with the Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Mind Your Career webinar entitled An Unconventional Path to Finding Your Ideal Job. Let me introduce today's presenter, Sheila O. Sheila is a dual alumna of the college and the master's program in the humanities. Sheila combines her love of music and the arts with her mad skills as director in shaping the computer science fundamentals certificate programs at Seattle University. She's also the faculty advisor for Seattle University's Women in Technology Club. Let me welcome and hand over the controls to Sheila.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for the introduction, and everyone, welcome to this webinar, Mind Your Career, an unconventional path to finding your ideal job. I'm just going to get started. If you can see my screen. So as Lucy mentioned, currently I worked as the director of the Computer Science Fundamental Certificate Program at Seattle University. I'll give a little bit more of details in terms of that role, but for now I wanted to at least share my contact information. For anyone that has any additional questions after this talk, you can feel free to email me or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm happy to field any questions or make a connection with any alumnus of the university. So to just get started, I wanted to share a little bit about my background. I definitely have an unconventional path to where I got to, and it started in 1998 when I actually entered the university at University of Chicago. I was originally a pre-med and biology major with the thoughts of actually becoming a doctor. And after some thought, even spending a couple years in a Drosophila lab and completing all but one course in the biology major, I really came to a crossroads and realized that this was really not the career path for me. At that time, I was also dual majoring in music. Music was something that I have done for my entire life and was something I was really passionate about. My second year in the university, I ended up switching majors to economics. During my tenure at the university, I was also involved in a lot of other things. Because of my music background, I played in the symphony orchestra, the new music ensemble. Every opportunity that I had, I actually played during several drama productions as well, and was in a quartet. This was also the time that I kind of discovered dance, and I was heavily involved with the Chicago Swing Dance Society. And in my experience with that, I became an instructor through the university with the CSDS club and traveled the nation for competitions as well as for teaching. Teaching was also something that I actually discovered within my time at the University of Chicago. I was first a math tutor through the math department and taught middle school and high school students within the Hyde Park area. I was also involved in a program through the music department where we would travel to some of the schools within the area that were cutting music programs. And as a way to keep music alive within these programs, we incorporated music with other disciplines like math. So teaching, for instance, the different beats and different, for instance, quarter notes, half notes, other things like that, through the study of fractions, or a discovery of music through creative writing. At the end of my time at University of Chicago as an undergraduate, I was looking for jobs and looking at all the options. I actually started applying to some consulting jobs. And it just seemed like one of the things that a lot of people were doing. This actually was also a really difficult time. I graduated in 2002. This happened right after 9/11. A lot of the jobs that were available in years past were not available anymore. And so a lot of the students were kind of trying to figure out what is the right path for me. So I was looking and kind of questioning the same things. A lot of my peers that went to the school decided that they would actually pursue graduate studies, and that became a really an option that I was thinking about as well. Towards the end of my last year there, I ended up taking, as part of my music major, a course in ethnomusicology. And for those who are unfamiliar with this field, this is a field of cultural studies in music, or an anthropology of music, of non-Western musics. And I was just floored by this particular field of study. I was just really loved the things that I was learning. And very late in the game, I decided that I wanted to actually pursue this study, and I wanted to apply to graduate school to learn more. Unfortunately, at this time, the admissions deadlines had already passed because this was around January or February, and most of the decisions had already been done for that year. So knowing that I love teaching, I decided to actually take a year, apply to graduate school, take my GRE, and in that time also teach, and ended up getting a job in Newton, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston, teaching mostly middle school math and music. So again, I've actually been kind of at a crossroads already at the age of 22, first going from biology into econ, then kind of figuring out what career path I wanted after college, and understanding that maybe I wanted to actually hold off on doing something in the business world and pursuing the study of music. So in my time at Newton, I really loved teaching. I had taught in the past, and I had the understanding that I thought that I'd like this, but not necessarily knowing this in practice, and really loved my students, really loved just the aspect of teaching and working with students. And so I was again at a crossroads. I was accepted into several PhD programs, and I ended up coming back to the University of Chicago with the understanding that I could always come back to teaching. And in this time I could also do teaching in some regard, even while I was working, or even while I was going to graduate school. So when I came back to the university as an ethnomusicology PhD, I had a tutoring business, and I also taught at Northwestern Center for Talent Development, and just love those opportunities to kind of get out, serve the community, work with students, as well as study something that I was very, very much interested in. After a couple years of study in the PhD program, and after attending several conferences through the Society of Ethnomusicology, I again was at a crossroads, and speaking with a lot of people in the field, and anyone that's in a PhD program, it's really something that you really have to be passionate about, not necessarily, and not just the study of it, but the career prospects after you have graduated with a PhD. And speaking with people that were already in the field, it seemed that this was not something that I was really, really passionate about doing. And so I, again, made a decision at that point to leave my PhD program, and I went to CAPS on campus, the Career and Placement Services, and again looked at possibilities in terms of consulting or other business-related jobs. At that point, I interviewed at multiple consulting firms, and I didn't really necessarily have an idea of what I wanted to do or what I would be good at. So I applied and interviewed at management consulting, strategy, healthcare, as well as technology consulting. Of these, I really found a fit and with the technology consulting firm. And this was a bit of a surprise for me because I actually at that point had no programming experience and really was not very technically savvy. So the company actually took a bit of a risk on me. I also took a bit of a risk coming into this company with not necessarily having the same background as everyone else. But speaking with the CEO and president that ended up hiring me at this company called Redmayne Technology, he basically said, you have the aptitude to learn the material. However, we're working with clients on a daily basis, and your teaching background and your communication skills make these an asset for you to be a consultant and to work with clients. And so I started my journey in the technical field, which was, again, quite a departure. And at the age of 25 at this point, I had gone from biology to econ to music to teaching to music again, and now into the technical field. So I joke sometimes that I've had 5 careers before the age of 25, and I have had several careers after that as well. So as I started into my job at Redmayne, I was there for 3.5 years. I moved to another consulting company, Objective Arts. And for anyone that actually has been a consultant or knows consultants, there's a lot of travel that's involved, a lot of long hours, and wanting to kind of have a change of pace, I decided to take an in-house position as a senior software engineer at Sitter City. And in this role, I quickly actually became, within 2 months, the technical lead. Within a year, I was offered both a manager position, where I'd be managing the technical team, but also a director role, where I would be working more on the business side, and I would be kind of leveraging and building relationships with the product and the marketing as well as the technology teams. So at this point, I was learning a lot, and I think that one thing that has always been kind of a constant is that I have looked for opportunities where I can grow and looked for opportunities where I can learn. And this has been something that I have done kind of throughout my entire life, where I've really tried to take advantage of every opportunity, whether it be in my undergrad, where I was involved in all the things that I was really interested in, as well as continuing my study in music, or taking a job where I really didn't have any kind of background in the technical field. These were all opportunities for me to learn and grow. So at this point, I had been at the company for a couple years, and I was feeling a little bit unsatisfied. I ended up having dinner with a friend, and this was an interesting conversation because he said to me, "I know the days that you've been teaching." And I asked how, and my friend said, "Because you're smiling on those days." And that was a really eye-opening statement, and I really had to kind of delve into that and think about that of, wow, maybe I'm not doing what I'm really passionate about. Maybe I need to kind of take a step back and think about like what I really want to do with the rest of my life. At that point, I actually enrolled in classes at Northwestern with the thought that maybe I would actually go back and get a master's degree in teaching and go back into the realm of teaching math or music or some other discipline that I was interested in. I also was looking for teaching jobs, and I made a choice in 2002 to actually change careers into teaching. So at that point, it was again a very difficult decision to kind of move from a corporate job that was well paying, that I was again being challenged on a daily basis, to really move into work that I was actually not just challenged but passionate about. So I started working at Year Up Chicago. And Year Up is actually a nonprofit that serves underprivileged youth, 18 to 24. And some of these students actually come from the worst neighborhoods in Chicago. And it's kind of workforce training where there is technical education, so they're taking classes to improve their technical skills, and then there is an internship portion of that. And again, there was a lot of reasons why this was a difficult transition, kind of moving from the corporate world into a nonprofit educational world. The hours went from a stable 40 hours a week to working many, many hours outside of work, and kind of really being on top of my game in terms of what I needed to accomplish at work. The other challenge for me was that in terms of a corporate job, I was, again, being well paid. This nonprofit, I was actually being paid less than a quarter of what I was being paid previously, which necessitated me to get another job and teach part-time and have more tutoring. So my days at that time, I was working pretty much nonstop from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. Monday through Thursday. So it was definitely a very, very difficult transition. Speaking with that friend, the friend that made the comment of, I know when you've been teaching because you're smiling, that same friend asked me, because I was again questioning, should I be doing this or not, said, is this leading you in the direction that you want to be going, right? And that was, again, one of those moments where I had to kind of think about it and understand that if my goal was to kind of move into teaching, I might not get the ideal job right off the bat. But is it moving me into the direction that I want to be going? And the answer to that was absolutely yes. So after a year of teaching at Europe, I ended up getting a job at Madison College, which previously was called Madison Area Technical College in Madison, Wisconsin. Again, it was a really great opportunity. I learned a lot within that particular position. And these couple years of experience in teaching allowed me to actually move back to the West Coast. I'm originally from the West Coast, and get a job and secure a job at Seattle University as the director of the Computer Science Fundamental Certificate Program. The certificate program is actually really unique. It's actually a career change program, and for students that don't necessarily have a computer science degree, but want to actually enter the technical field and eventually go into the master's program in computer science. And the interesting thing is that, as mentioned, I've been kind of transitioning in different roles, trying to find the thing that I'm passionate about and what I'm good at. And a lot of the students in this program, and actually all the students, are in that same position. So I feel that I have a lot of insight to kind of share as both the director of this program and as their professor and advisor, to kind of lead them to this new venture and a new course of study within their lives. So at Seattle University, as mentioned by Lucy, I have also leveraged computer science, and the technology field in general is very underrepresented in terms and doesn't have a lot of gender diversity. So I started the Women in Technology Club on campus to help support women in the computer science and software engineering fields. Another thing that has happened is that I keep going back to the idea that I know that you're happy when you're teaching, comment, because when I was not teaching, I was working, and that was pretty much it. And because of my unsatisfaction with my position, I wasn't really doing all the things that I normally do, like music and dance and volunteering. And so when I moved into teaching, even though I was working many more hours than I was in the corporate world, I was re-energized and was getting so much out of the experience that I have now discovered again music and dance and volunteering. So currently, I also am playing with the Seattle Philharmonic here in Seattle. I actually also dance and am part of a vintage chorus girl group. And I have two actually volunteer opportunities, or where one of them is Live Music Project, which connects the community with classical live music experiences in Seattle. And I'm a board member of that organization, as well as ABI Seattle, which is under the umbrella of the Anita Borg Institute. The Anita Borg Institute is the organization that puts on the Grace Hopper celebration every year, and is the largest women in technology organization in the world. So my work in there is, again, supporting women within the Puget Sound area and helping them kind of manage all levels of entering the workforce, re-entering the workforce, supporting them within different technology fields. So that is a little bit about my background. As mentioned, it was definitely not a typical way of getting from point A to point B. And I think that one key thing is that I was definitely at a crossroads in multiple points of my life, and kind of making a decision of what do I actually want to be doing, and how do I actually get there. I think that one thing that I really want to kind of mention and talk about is that a lot of these things that I have done in my life, there wasn't necessarily a straightforward path to get to from point A to point B. And some questions that I definitely asked myself, and some questions that I would ask, that you ask yourself as well, are what skills do you have? And what are you good at? And what do you like to do? And kind of tacking onto this is how to actually get there may not necessarily be straightforward, but there's definitely a path of getting there. So I will say that in terms of the skills that I have, again, I didn't necessarily have the skills and technology to move into a technical field, but I did leverage my communication skills. I did leverage my problem solving and logic skills. All of those things are really important in the technology field, and those were the things that I brought to the table. In terms of what I'm good at, again, some of those things, there's an ownership of what I am good at, and there's also an ownership of what I don't know. And so for me, learning has always been a passion of mine, and I took the things that I knew and brought those to the table. And the people that I worked for found value in that. So I think that ownership of that is really important. But then taking that also and understanding here that the skills that I need to develop is another question that you should ask, in figuring out how to do that. And what do you like to do? So again, no job is perfect. Obviously, there's ups and downs. But at this point in time, what I do and the passion that I have for teaching, it really outweighs any negative or cons that I may have in terms of what I'm doing. And so kind of understanding that where I am right now, I really love what I do. And I like the fact that I can actually say that. And so understanding that is also another thing. And an interesting thing is I actually had friends that have led me to the position and the point that I am in now. I didn't necessarily, I've always thought that maybe I would come back to teaching, but it was kind of one of these nebulous things that wasn't necessarily a point in time that I would say I was going to go back to this thing. And so I found it really valuable that friends of mine actually recognized that this was something that I was good at, that I was passionate about, and that something that I really wanted to do. And so I would ask your friends and family also these same questions. What skills do you have? For them, what do you think, what do you bring to the table? What do they believe you bring to the table? What skills do you have? What are you good at? And what do they think that you like to do? And that can actually give you some insight. I've also often told students who are kind of wondering what they should do next with their life, ask your friends and family, what can you envision me doing, right? And so kind of having that outside perspective and also kind of internalizing and understanding what you want to do with your life can actually lead you if you are in a position where you may not know your next move. So with that, I just wanted to share a few things. The first is to kind of leverage your skills and think outside the box. A lot of times I have had friends or students who have looked at a job description and thought, okay, I don't have this skill and I don't have this skill, okay? And definitely there's a lot that you don't have, but there's a lot that you do have, right? And so kind of leveraging and understanding what you actually do bring to the table is really important, keeping those in mind. Thinking outside the box. So there's many ways of developing skills. Some of those are through education and taking more classes. Some of those are going and getting insight from people that are in the industry, reaching out to your connections, whether it's through your work or LinkedIn or alumni network. Going to, for instance, meetups or other types of events that may be in the field that you're interested in. All of these things are ways of developing skills, but also developing connections, which are really important to possibly understanding what the field that you're in or the job that you want to possibly go into is really all about, to get that insider perspective, but also to kind of develop the skills in maybe not a conventional way. And speaking of that, ask yourself, I mentioned, is this leading me to where I want to go? And this path may, again, not be straightforward, and it may kind of be a winding road, and there may be many steps to actually get to where you want to go, or to be in that ideal position. But as long as you're getting there, right, that's something that's very important. Another thing that I wanted to mention was that you really want to develop skills and interests inside and outside of working hours. So within your work, there are things that you can do within your work. For instance, asking a manager if there are projects that will leverage your skills or develop new skills. Most companies will have some percentage of your work that is really personal and professional development. So you will never kind of understand what is possible unless you ask. I mentioned this as well, but also developing those skills by going to meetups, using your connections, asking around. Again, there's a lot of unconventional ways. And if it requires you to go to school, that's also another option. This is an interesting thing. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. So imposter syndrome is this kind of idea that you really feel like an imposter in what you're doing, and more specifically, you're not necessarily comfortable with what you're bringing to the table. So you feel a little bit like an imposter. I will admit that this is definitely something I have felt often, moving from one career or one kind of domain to another. It's just natural that you're not necessarily going to know everything right off the bat. And as you get older, this becomes more difficult because there is a recognition of the things that you're good at and the things that you are not good at. So I think that the best thing to do is to acknowledge this and own it, not to beat yourself up for not knowing everything or not being great from the get-go. And it's okay to fail and just kind of learning from that. So this is definitely something that's uncomfortable, right? So moving into a different field, changing careers, trying something new, there's going to be a point where you're just not going to know a lot. And when I first started in the field of technology, I was 25, and so I wasn't that old, but at that point, other 25-year-olds had at least 4 years of experience within college and several years of work experience outside of college. And so coming from I know zero to someone that has 8 years of experience plus was really a daunting thing. But again, recognizing what I mentioned before, knowing and owning what you bring to the table, understanding that you were actually hired for a reason, and knowing that you can develop these skills, maybe not immediately, but with time and motivation, that these are things that you can kind of work towards. And again, this is something that you're going into the direction that you want to be going, maybe slowly, and with the help of your connections, developing skills both inside and outside of work, all of that stuff. Finally, there are different levels of risk, and you have to find what works for you. Moving jobs is not a trivial thing, and not just moving jobs, but changing careers is, again, not a trivial thing. It's definitely a difficult thing because you're going from something that you know to something that you don't. And I think that for me personally, that transition was facilitated, or it was made easier by the fact that I knew what I was bringing to the table and I was kind of working towards these things. So if I was thinking about when I moved into technology, I understood that I had and had some logic and math skills that I could bring to the table, and I was strong in problem solving. And so using that and understanding that was something that allowed me to take that risk. The understanding also that I was able to communicate well and would be able to work with clients was another reason that I had some confidence, even though the imposter syndrome would come up from time to time. transitioning from technology, corporate technology, into the academic world. Again, with my experiences teaching, I was kind of able to develop those skills to move into that world a little bit easier. And again, some of these things will not just necessarily come over time. I think that understanding early on what your passions are and what you want to do. There are, again, different small, less risky ways of experiencing and exploring different options, and using and learning from that to possibly then make a shift into a bigger role. And there doesn't necessarily need to be an idea of I leave my job tomorrow and go into this new thing. It could be that I am working and I'm going to explore this other thing in my free time. I'm going to volunteer in this particular domain to see if this is really right for me. I'm going to talk to person X, Y, and Z who has a lot of experience in these to really find out what this work is all about, right? So in our day and age, there's a lot of information out there, and for the most part, people are willing to talk and willing to help. So I think that kind of understanding what level of risk, not necessarily jumping off the deep end, but what works for you is going to be really important. And with that, that's actually the end of this talk. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, thanks, Sheila. That was great. I love this question. And the writer and I were obviously on the same wavelength because I had it written down as well. She says, great presentation and a story she can relate to a lot given her own career path. You mentioned a friend who asked you a good question at the right time in your journey. Yeah. So she's just curious to know what kind of role mentoring you had as you made your way through your career.
Right. So I think that, again, developing those connections, I always tell, regardless of where you're at in your career path, and this even starts with students, is use people, use your connections wisely. If you have a professor, talk with them. If you have coworkers, talk with them. Every connection that you make, either inside or outside of work, is really going to be important, because even if they're not going to necessarily help you and give insight at that moment, they also have a network of connections, and they also have a network of connections that can actually either provide possibly a job or insight or even perspective. So all of that's really important. In terms of role models that I had, again, I mostly sought those out instead of having them come to me. So I looked in terms of, you know, you always kind of just kind of like you want to dress for the job that you want, you also want to kind of ask and be mindful of where you want to be going. And so if there was someone at my company or someone that I knew, even if it was a friend of a friend, I would always reach out to them and say, hey, do you mind having a coffee? I'd really like to talk to you about what you're doing and how you got there and if you like the work. And so having that insight was actually really, really important to me. I will say that in the technology field, one of the reasons why I actually am involved with the Anita Borg Society and the Women in Technology Club is that the support for women in technology is not necessarily there. And so not everyone is in a position where they are comfortable asking for help or going to people. So I think that definitely this is becoming more of a trend of offering help and offering support instead of having employees ask for it, but really kind of leveraging and seeing, like, this is someone who is doing interesting work. How can I ask them what they're doing? How can I have insight? And really just like understanding that mentorship is not just a one-way street, that I had a lot of insight from someone that was senior from me, understanding how to get to the next level, but is also kind of like reverse mentoring as well. That was really important in terms of, here are some skills that I have that I've developed recently that can help you in your job as well. So kind of understanding that mentorship is not a one-way street, that it's something that can be beneficial for both sides.
Great. And there was a question that was very closely related to what you were just talking about coaching. And I really like what you said, because you, even if you think that you need to be coached, you have skills that are useful to other people as well. And by developing these groups, you can
Yes,
help each other.
definitely.
Great.
Were there?
So yeah, there are more questions, absolutely. When interviewing for new roles, how did you or didn't you present your lack of experience in that field? Did you present yourself as extremely confident that you could handle everything, or did you allow that uncertainty must be present as a major transition?
Yes. Um, as someone that has interviewed a lot and as someone that has interviewed other people a lot, I will say that there's a lot of that in terms of an interview, part of it is the skills that you bring, and the other part of it is, are you a good fit for the company? And understanding that, I think, is really important. And so in terms of the skills, I was very clear about what I did know and what I didn't know. And so if I was asked a question that I did know, I would answer that confidently. If I was asked a question that I didn't know, I would own up to the fact that I didn't know it, but also say, but there is something that is related to this that may be similar. Am I on the right track? Or I actually don't know this. Can you actually provide a little bit more insight in terms of this? So I think that definitely going into an interview or even looking at a job description, again, having all the skills that are listed on a job description is pretty much impossible. And so understanding that there isn't necessarily an expectation to have all those things, but having the skills necessary, but also having the right fit and having you be a good addition to the team, and being mindful of the value that you are providing, and highlighting those is going to be really important.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that comes up a lot. We hear about people who look at a job description and they have 10 things or priorities, which is kind of crazy, but they can't all be priorities. And then some people say, I got 8 out of 10, I'm going to apply. Another person, same 8 out of 10 skills, say, I only have 8 out of these 10, I shouldn't apply. So is this something that you recommend to people as well, not just in this webinar, but in general?
Yeah, so most, again, job descriptions will have required skills. Those are generally less negotiable than the recommended skills. And I also will tell both friends of mine as well as students, try to find the job that you want. And if you go to a career builder or Indeed or any job site, there's generally, if you type in whatever job that you want, there'll be a list of kind of skills that are required. What I generally say is that if you don't have the required skills, that's a really good starting point to ask yourself, now how can I develop these skills? And so looking for the job you want could be a process. Looking at these job descriptions can be then a good way of understanding, I need to develop these particular skills before I apply to this job. Or you can talk to some people that are in the industry to say, how important is it that I don't have this particular skill, or which of these skills should I actually, or should I prioritize in terms of developing, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you. You mentioned earlier when you were going for interviews out of college
Yes.
that you mentioned that you met with a lot of consulting firms. What was it about the consulting, the tech consulting job, sorry, that was most interesting to you, even though you didn't come from a tech background?
Yes. So I think that the consulting aspect itself was really interesting. The the firms that I've worked with have had projects that are anything from a couple months to a couple years. So there was something really exciting about working on these projects with clients and having this kind of sense of problem solving um, on almost a daily basis. So the problem solving aspect of it was really interesting. The other thing that was also really interesting to me was that you were necessarily basing your work on one particular technology or one particular solution. So there's a lot of different needs and goals that are at stake. So for instance, what technology or what solution would be best served? Here are the technology solutions that are recommended. Here are all the different aspects. So for me, that was really kind of an exciting thing, and it was really a great thing for me personally, just because I had a lot of exposure to different types of and ways of working with clients, different ways of understanding business needs, and also kind of then leveraging and developing my skills in technology, and not just one platform but many platforms. So all of those things were really exciting. Again, what really helped me in that job was both my ability to problem solve, and I've always been someone that has really loved math and has really loved like puzzles and Sudoku and those types of things. And so it's interesting that kind of brain teasers and my kind of obsession with those as a child actually really helped me with this job, because that kind of mindset of thinking, and really my interview was actually based on a bunch of brain teaser problem solving logic problems, that those skills actually helped me be a good problem solver and a good solution builder within this particular job. So it was very exciting, and I learned a lot within that. So.
Great. Well, one thing that you mentioned, and I'm sure everybody caught it as well, is about how when you're happy at your work, you're doing more things out of your work, volunteering, giving back to the community, doing cool things. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so again, my entire life I've always been someone that has been very busy, and I've always kind of taken advantage of everything around me, and to the point where in my college life I was doing 2 majors, traveling 3 weekends a month for dance. I was in 4 performing groups. I was tutoring on the side. So I was doing all these things because I was enjoying my time and really taking advantage of everything that was available to me at the university. And that kind of continued. And I understood that there was a point in time where I was just working and not doing anything else. And so really, again, the satisfaction, even though you hear that your work is not your life, or that you don't work to live, but you don't live to work, but you work to live. I think that you can take that up a notch. Instead of just working to live, you should actually work and be passionate about it so that your livelihood is enhanced. And that's really something that has struck me, that if I am at a point where I used to be so busy and had such a fulfilling life, and I got to a point where work was bringing me down to a point that it was challenging but unsatisfying, that I was kind of dropping all these other things that were also kind of enhancing my life. So right now, I'm working more hours than I was working previously, but I'm also have the energy, because of how fulfilling my work is, to really have the energy to do all these other things in my life. And I think that, again, that was something that was really important, and kind of an eye-opening thing that I didn't really recognize until I was actually in it. The comment of you're only happy when, or you're happy, I know that you're happy when you're teaching, this was an activity that I understood was bringing joy in my life. And by kind of focusing on the thing that I knew was making me happy allowed me to find other things and passion projects in my life that also made me happy. So I didn't actually mention this very much, but in terms of the 2 things that I do, as a board member of the Live Music Project and my work with the Anita Borg Institute, again, the work with the Live Music Project is an interesting one in that it actually leverages my interest in music and serves the community, but my work in the board is actually to also kind of oversee the technology needs and work with different volunteers and interns that are working on rebuilding our technology platform. So it's an interesting kind of insight in terms of I was brought on as a board member because of my experience in music, but also my experience in the technology realm and my ability to kind of mentor volunteers as well as interns. All of these skills are the reason that I was brought in to be part of this particular organization. So it's an interesting kind of path that brought me to, again, something that I'm really passionate about, that is an intersection of a lot of the things that I am interested in, but would never have really happened if I hadn't developed all these other skills. And so.
Great. Well, we have time for a few more questions. I don't see any on the board right now, but I did want to say, I wonder if some of you think, how does Lucy even find people who are cool like Sheila to come and talk? Well, the great thing was that we had Career Month back in November. We have it every month. And she was recommended as a panelist for the Career Month event in Seattle, but she wasn't available because, guess what? She's incredibly busy. And so I thought, okay, well, let me talk to Sheila and find out when she'd be available. So she's doing this now and started at 10 o'clock her time in the morning. So I greatly appreciate it. And I have to say that alums are great presenters. If you if you're a great presenter and you think you'd like to talk to other alumni, this is an opportunity for you to come forward and let me know when I send out the link to the recording. Or if you know somebody you think, hey, this person would be a great presenter, then please let me know, because you can only make the webinar programs better by sharing this information with me.
Definitely.
And do you have any final remarks, Sheila? I don't think anything else.
I just will go back to the information for my contact. So again, I definitely, if anyone wants to connect or ask questions after this particular talk, then feel free to reach out. I'm happy to speak with anyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila. I really enjoyed this webinar. I thought you were as interesting as the alumna who suggested you would be. Just to let you all know that this month only, usually we only do two webinars a month, but this month we're doing 3. We've got one on the 19th as well. It's called Home Sweet Home Chicago, and it's really, it's pretty narrow. It's for people who are interested in what real estate is happening, what's happening with real estate, pardon me, in Chicago. So real estate's been hit hard in different cities, and Chicago, like all cities, is unique. So we're offering that on the 19th with 2 alumni from the business school. And then on the 20th, we have an alumnus from the master's program who's a cybersecurity expert. So if anybody's interested, it's in the news all the time. And LinkedIn puts him in the top 1% of people being followed on LinkedIn. So I hope you can join us for one or both. Again, thank you, Sheila, so much. And everyone, I'll be sending out the link to the recording very shortly. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sheila. Bye, everyone. Take care.